welcome. Helen, Joseph, welcome. Anne and Helen, how did this film get started? Whose idea was it to get it started?
Anne came out for a work weekend on Great Gull Island, and she worked very hard. And during the time she was working, she cleared an area. She made openings in the grass, and simultaneously, a roseate would land in the opening and scold Anne, telling her that she'd done enough on that opening and she should move on, make more openings. So Anne did that. And at the end of this, at the end of the day, we were walking back to the headquarters building, and Anne said, "You know, Helen, I think it would be great to make a film about Great Gull Island." And I just kind of looked at her and I said, "Well, I think that's a great idea."
I do remember clearing the terraces for the roseates, and literally the roseate terns were waiting to go in to get ready to nest. And so you felt like the work that we as volunteers were doing was really essential, and that it was just an amazing motley group of volunteers. And to me, it was so striking that all of these people were working for the same common goal, to benefit terns. Helen and I both worked together to make sure really the whole of the project was illustrated in the film. And in my mind, following the natural history of the birds. I don't know if you noticed, we had months, May, June, so that you knew what was happening when with the birds, sort of created structure. And then what was difficult was figuring out how are we going to weave in all these amazing international adventures into that nesting season. So that was a bit tricky, but it worked. It somehow seemed to come together, and that was really important. So that was why South America was included, the Azores were included, et cetera, et cetera.
Great Gull Island was originally a World War II sort of, not a fortress, that's not what you call it back then, but it was a station. Tell us a little bit about that history if you can.
It dates even earlier than that. They started building the fort on the island. The official name was Fort Mikey for the fort. And they started that around the time of the Spanish-American War. They started it in the 1890s. And so the fort actually had been fully operational by the time of World War I. In fact, some years back, I happened to be reading a history book about the naval aspects of World War I, and near the back of the book, it mentioned that the German High Command in World War I had contingency plans for all sorts of things. And one of their contingency plans called for sending the German Navy to bombard Fort Mikey on Great Gull Island in the event that the US entered the war, World War I, entered it against Germany. By the time of World War II, with the advent of air power, the fort was mainly obsolete, but it was still manned, and it still had very large guns on it, and was there in case there were any enemy ships tried to enter the Sound to, say, attack New Haven or something. And there were, from the time of World War I, there were still minefields against enemy ships that were controlled from Great Gull Island.
Did you have other plans, and what changed when you fell in love with the terns?
I'd been interested in ruddy ducks, and I'd gone to Canada and looked at ruddy ducks. But ruddy ducks sleep a lot during the day, and I would be sitting there watching them sleeping, and that really isn't very interesting. And so when a woman from the education department, Catherine Rossino at the Museum of Natural History, called me and asked me if I'd like to go to Gull Island because they had a trip going out, I just thought that I jumped at the chance. I'd never seen Gull Island and I hadn't heard much about it, but I was interested in finding out a little bit about it. And when I saw it, when we landed and the birds were all there, lots of birds and doing things all the time, and different doing different things all the time, not like sleeping ruddy ducks. And I thought, oh my, this would be such fun to work here. And it was a small enough island so that we could cover it, 17 acres, and document really what was happening on Gull Island to both species of terns, and try to increase the areas on the island that both species could use. And that just seemed like a thing that would be such fun.
And Anne, can you give us a little back story on yourself as well?
I used to teach Latin, German, French, and Spanish. My husband and I have one son who, for some unknown reason, was totally into birds as a very young kid. So I couldn't let him go to Central Park birding by himself at 3 and 4. So I would go with him, and then I started volunteering at the museum because they'd lost an assistant, and could I help write some labels? And anyway, so one thing led to the next, and birds have really become a focal point for our family. We've traveled lots and lots of places to find different species of birds, and we never go anywhere, even to a big city, without looking at birds.
What are some of the things that you had to go through to prepare to film in other countries?
You have to find out what the regulations and everything is. And since we were first going to Argentina, we found out, for example, in Argentina, we had to work with another film company. So basically we had to hire a film company to work with us. We had a lovely driver that they supplied for us, and a fixer who came with us everywhere we went. And that was great. It was just, one more thing, but also, as far as getting in our equipment, we had to, in Argentina, everything had to be listed. They had to help us make sure that all of our equipment we had brought in, all of our equipment we were taking out. In Brazil, it was even more difficult because it's hard to get a visa to work in Brazil as a filmmaker. It's a little bit difficult, but I luckily had a friend who works, who's a lawyer for filmmakers in Brazil, and she actually helped me connect with a Brazilian firm there who helped us organize everything there. But we also had, both in Argentina and in Brazil, we had Esteban and in Argentina helping us organize hotels and so forth. And that was great because Helen had these long-standing relationships. And then we had both Pedro Lima and Aquasis and all the people, Jason Mobley, Gabriela Ramirez, Onofre, all who helped us figure out, how do we get to this small fishing village on the north coast of Brazil? All of that had to be worked out. And then in the Azores, Veronica Neves, who Helen has worked with, I guess Veronica met Helen in the late 90s. And Veronica was amazing, had everything set up for us when we arrived, and everything worked out.
The fact that we could work with so many people on a similar subject, and we all felt that what we were doing was helping the birds. And that was really wonderful.
Helen and Joe both said in the film and on multiple occasions that these birds are not confined by these ridiculously constructed borders that we have in our world, just they're part of the world. And it was such an eye-opening thought to consider all of us being part of that world and not being so divided as we've divided ourselves up. It's interesting to see this international collaboration as a worldwide collaboration, much like the birds go from country to country without a passport or worrying or anything.
Helen, there was a moment in the film where you were talking to one of your collaborators in one of these countries, and you just felt a little overwhelmed, where you said, we just can't do everything, and here these people who we've worked with, but now we're getting a full commitment, and it made you tearful. You just, it was a wonderful moment to see that.
And I'll never forget it, because we couldn't do it all ourselves. Couldn't come down enough.
But it was beautiful because, here you've got now committed partners in another country, and whatever relationship that you've built with them, it's continuing years later. I mean, if something doesn't continue the next year, it's because they were just doing it for the time to please somebody, and then they're going to move on. But these people are just as committed as you are.
Another thing that is wonderful to note is that although Helen seemed worried about that, she was not deterred. She came up with a way to solve it. And that is something I've really admired about Helen, is she doesn't worry about a no. She figures around a way around it and always gets there, whatever she wants to get done. It's great.
We want to ask the three of you, what have you learned about yourself through the making of Full Circle? Joseph, we'll start with you.
As I believe I said in the film, one of the things that the project has given me, basically my life has been, the project has been meeting people I never would have encountered before, the people in Argentina and Brazil, and forming friendships that endure, and that has been wonderful. Obviously, the last year and a half has been very difficult for the whole world with COVID, but we've managed to stay in touch via the internet.
I think I sort of rediscovered how much I enjoy learning, and this whole process was an amazing learning situation, like from the very beginning. I had no idea what I was doing, and I'm 54, so it's not like, I had lots of background in lots of different things, but being able to learn and take in new things and meet new people, those are things that really keep me going, and that's really what I value. And when people are doing something great, I feel it's important for the world to know about it. And that is why I'm really glad that we made this film, and I'm so thrilled that we had finished filming before COVID.
Well, I think that if you have an idea and you want to do something, you should do it and not be discouraged if there are places along the way that don't help you. And we have had, in the involvement of other people in the project, tremendous contribution. And they've all added ideas and worked hard, and it's been a wonderful experience for us. And that you yourself can do a certain amount, but you can't do it all.